the conversation within legal circles, both in terms of practitioners and academics, when it comes to um, generative AI and specifically, large language models, ChatGPT 3 and 4. The conversation is pretty intense.
Hi, I'm Esther.
And I'm Sean.
I write about AI news here at Tech Target in Massachusetts.
And I edit Esther's stories.
We're here to talk with tech experts about everything AI and ChatGPT.
And don't forget about Google Bard.
Whether it's who's ahead in the generative AI race, the metaverse, digital twins, or even the latest in autonomous vehicles, we've got it covered. Right, Sean?
Yep, we've got it covered.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the inaugural episode of the Targeting AI podcast. On today's episode, we're speaking with Michael Bennett, a lawyer and the Director of Education Curriculum and Business Lead for Responsible AI at the Institute for Experiential AI at Northeastern University. Before coming to Northeastern, Michael was an associate research professor in the School for the Future of Innovation in Society and the Center for Science and Imagination at Arizona State University. Other than serving as an associate professor, he has worked as an executive committee member of the Young People's Project and served as a member of the American Bar Association Committee on Bioethics and the Law. He's currently a board member of Leonardo, the International Society for the Arts, Science, and Technology. Welcome to the podcast, Michael, and thanks for being our inaugural guest.
Thank you so much, Esther. It's great to be joining you today.
So, Michael, you're business lead for responsible AI at the Institute for Experiential AI at Northeastern. So, what does that job entail and mean for you personally? And how does it intersect with academics and curriculum? And also, how does the Institute define responsible AI?
It's a fascinating job, Sean. So, effectively, in this role within the Institute, I do several things. So, in part, I bring to bear my understanding of policy, law, and what it takes to build or engineer new regulations that are applied to technology to help uh, really clients, be they government entities or corporations, think about how best to regulate various types of artificial intelligence and implementations of artificial intelligence. It's pretty fascinating in the sense that uh, the many laws that theoretically could be applied to new technological applications of various types, but because of all of the concern around AI, and right now especially generative AI, and I'd say even further, applications like ChatGPT 4, there's an incredible sense of urgency around the need for new regulation. So I'm spending a lot of time talking to elected officials and their legislative aides about how to craft new laws. Spending a lot of time talking to companies and groups that represent entire sectors or industries to help them think about how to comply with laws that already exist or and laws that are likely to come into effect within the next year or so. And then also helping learners of various types come to grips with what it means to be living through this period in which the technological innovation is racing at pace and regulation is also building up speed. That last bit kind of goes to that part of your question that asks about the connections between the kind of service portion of my duty and the educational parts of my duties inside of the institute. In that, um, all of that work that goes into helping those clients think through how best to respond to AI and to AI regulation, it's also extremely useful in building courses, right? It's the grist for building courses. And by course, when I say courses, I mean in a very broad sense. So certainly traditional courses, the types of things one would expect to find within a university system like Northeastern. So, building a global AI regulation course for law students right now that'll very likely come online before this year's out. building another course that is more for practitioners, lawyers, and paralegals that focuses on the state of AI regulation domestically now. And by that I mean both at the municipal level and the state level, and soon to be at the federal level. And then a course that will be available within a couple of months that will be strictly online. That is more of an introduction to artificial intelligence for non-experts. So imagine, very thoughtful, intelligent folks who are simply not computational scientists and haven't taught themselves how to code and haven't had a whole lot of experience with AI. But like all of us, wake up every day bombarded by AI stories, many of them ringing alarm bells, and are now, I have to imagine, wondering, those folks are wondering, first, what is this? Two, what does it have to do with me and my life, and my family's life, and our well being? And three, how realistic are all of these claims? It sounds like we woke up in a science fiction movie. And so that last course, which right now it has a working title of Demystifying AI, is focused on answering those kind of general questions. And so that's how the first set of activities connects to education and the creation of new courses. And then lastly, you asked about responsible AI, responsible artificial intelligence, and what we mean by that. Um, the alarm bells that I mentioned, they're being rung in large part because folks who are close to the space, close to the action, the development of AI, investment in AI, the dissemination of it, implementation of it in various types of organizations, they are on the same page, even if they're coming from different perspectives, say political perspectives or social positions. Many of them are on the same page and believing that AI is sufficiently powerful and sufficiently black boxed that it's causing concern. Even some of the most adept experts in the space are struggling to explain how something like ChatGPT does what it does. We, at the same time, we're seeing various types of AI approaches folded into very sensitive processes in society, whether one gets a mortgage or not, whether one is granted bail or not. And so, if the technology is so complicated and so nuanced that even experts can't understand it, but at the same time, it's being used to help decision makers determine the fates of millions of people at this point, many of them coming from marginalized communities. You can see how troubling, right, the this situation is for many people. And so, responsible artificial intelligence ultimately is intended to be a kind of solution for those types of concerns, or at least part of a solution set for those types of concerns. Oftentimes, when we use the phrase responsible artificial intelligence inside of the institute, we mean that we aim for transparency. We want to reduce the opaqueness of the processes that fall under the moniker AI. We also want to help clients find a way towards greater fairness in the outcomes, right, of AI applications. We are, and I think many of us inside of the institute would say this last bit is maybe our central concern with responsible artificial intelligence. We're interested in AI human teaming. We don't endorse AIs driving all decision making on their own. We want, as we say sometimes in a shorthand fashion, a human to always be in the loop, so that a person who is on the business end of an AI process and gets some kind of outcome or decision, that person should always have recourse to a human that can provide them with an explanation. And if the case is serious enough, the situation is serious enough, another opportunity to be assessed.
I also was thinking about, you were talking about speaking to I guess lawmakers a little bit, and I wonder, just as a follow up, is how often do they take your advice, right? How often do they try to implement some of the things that you're seeing and then advising them, especially as it comes to responsible AI?
So it's early days, and the legal processes, the legislative sausage making, as some of my friends like to put it, process. It takes a lot of time, and so I wouldn't want to judge them on their embrace of the suggestions just yet. But their response to the suggestions, the recommendations, the best practices that we're putting on the table for them, it's been quite positive. The legislators, and more often their legislative aides in particular, uh, appear to a person to be very open, right? They are curious, they're concerned on behalf of their constituencies, and they're also oftentimes kind of pressed for time, right? They may need to respond to citizen groups or NGOs that are banging on their door on a regular basis relatively quickly. But of course, oftentimes the lawmakers and their aides are not they're not technically trained, and so in addition to coming to grips with the recommendations that we put in front of them, they also have to embrace the space enough to kind of understand the fundamentals of the technologies, and that's a big lift, right? It's not I'm not asking them to get PhDs in the space, but that mystification course that I was talking about, that's intended to kind of speed that process up a bit, because it's very difficult to regulate something that again sounds like it fell out of a Samuel Delaney short story, or an Ursula Le Guin novel. These things sound, because science fiction has made so much use of them, they sound like they come out of science fiction, but in fact, they much more often come out of mathematics departments and computational sciences programs.
Mike, I appreciate the reference to the great science fiction author Samuel Delaney, having grown up reading science fiction myself. But so when you're talking about lawmakers and legislators, are you talking to the mass delegation or all different delegations or aides for Congress people in Washington, or which
So
people?
yeah, so the audience for that type of service that we're providing is all of the above and more. So um, all of the elected officials in the United States, we'd love to be speaking to all of them. Right now, state officials in the Commonwealth, state officials in Maine, elected officials in several municipalities in the region, right in the Northeast, I will say, just kind of generally, and then preliminary discussions as well with elected officials on the West Coast. What we're finding at the federal level, at the national level, domestically, is that AI may be hitting us at exactly the wrong time in terms of the composition of the elected officials there. And I'm not even talking about where they sit on the political spectrum. I'm just talking about their backgrounds. Uh, there are just not that many folks that are elected to Congress right now, to the U.S. Congress right now, that have technical backgrounds or science backgrounds, much less computational sciences backgrounds. You can count them on a single hand. I'm
That's
pretty
a huge
sure,
issue. Yeah.
right? And so it's there's a need for it and a willingness to embrace it, and we are charging ahead in our efforts to reach as many of them as we can.
Yeah, that's actually kind of interesting, especially as you see, like, in the past few weeks, where you have, like, I guess, OpenAI CEO going to Congress and they're trying to understand it, and then the Biden administration is trying to understand it. But there is I guess, a law that New York City just came out, the Automated Employment Decision to law. It went into effect in July. Can you just describe the law and what exactly is the city asking of its employers?
This law, and for those who want to dig it up, it's referred to as Local Law 144. That's its technical designation, and it's been designed to address some of the concerns that we were alluding to a few moments ago. The kind of closed off opaqueness of AI processes that are kind of exacerbating concerns when they're applied to sensitive areas like health or finance or say civil liberties, human rights, etc. So local law 144 is it's been designed to curb some of the potential downsides when AI is used in employment contexts, and specifically when AI is used to sift through job applications and to assess existing employee performance. So instead of, to be concrete about that, instead of having, an HR official look over timesheets, look over, direct report assessments, maybe do a review of external clients that have engaged with a particular employee, using an AI instead of a human to do those types of things, and then to have that AI kind of generate a report or generate a grade or some kind of numerical coefficient that then kind of guides the process in determining how well that employee has performed over a certain period of time. And if they're applying for a job, whether they should go on to the next round or go into the dustbin. Their application should go into the dustbin. And so the law has those types of issues as its just call it its object of concern. And so what it does is says, look, if you are a company based in New York City that is using AI in those ways, then there's certain things that you have to do in order to stay on the right side of this law. You have to be open about the fact that you're doing this. You have to also take your system through a kind of verification process to make sure that it's not going to be turned one way or another by biases, right? That will kind of negatively impact folks from marginalized communities or folks that are coming from populations that have been historically discriminated against in employment situations. It's also saying that you need to be transparent about what you're doing, not just in terms of engaging with a regulator, not even just in terms of engaging with, say, your employees, but also in a public facing manner. So the websites of those types of companies to which this law applies as of July 1, 2023, they also need to list vital information about what they're doing with AI on those websites in a way that's publicly accessible. And so it's a pretty ambitious law, I guess, as befits the most populous and arguably the most powerful city in the United States of America. But it's also faced some non-trivial hurdles. So more than a year, probably closer to 2 years worth of effort from its birth as a notion or an idea to its eventual implementation. And again, let's see, today is the 6th, and so we're just a couple of days into its enforcement regime. And so it was 2 public comment sessions, probably 2 pushbacks of its enforcement date as well. Many stakeholders had many concerns about this about this law. Inside of the institute, we've done a pretty detailed analysis of all of the public comments around it, as well as looking at the various iterations, the drafts of the law before the finalized version. And we think we can use what we've learned about this to both help employees and employers there in New York navigate this new legal terrain. And perhaps at least as importantly, we could use that learning that our research has given us to help other jurisdictions, other municipalities, states as well. who are certainly looking at New York in the hopes of building their own version of a law like this.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a pretty tough act, right? Looking at everything that you described, like you also have to have it. You said they have to have it on their website too, because I mean, I think at this point, for the most employees that are looking for a job, you kind of know when it's an AI that rejects you. Like I can tell when I send an application, and then the next minute it's been rejected.
Yeah. It's so strange. In some ways, it's so strange, right? Because if you're submitting your application and you're getting thanks but no thanks within 45 seconds or so, odds
Yeah,
are, right?
it's
Odds are,
me.
yeah.
So, the California Consumer Privacy Act, of course, and we have the GDPR over in Europe. And so those acts, even though they're specific to certain regions, they've had an effect, in my view, on many other regions, including many states. People doing business outside of California still starting to heed some of those provisions. Well, whether they're strict enough or not is a different question, I think, but it is having an effect. And so the same thing with the Act 144. Do you expect that to have any kind of a domino effect or an influential role in other states and cities?
I think it's a real possibility. Again, thinking about the city that we're talking about, it's huge. Tens of thousands of companies there. Uh, Many of them, some of the most powerful countries, not just in the United States but on the planet. Many of them with thousands, in some instances, tens of thousands of employees around the world. And so you could certainly imagine a company that simply has, say, 500 employees being based there in New York, um, with, say, 50% of their employees there and the rest sprinkled outside of the city. And so the law effectively being applicable to half of their employees. Like this company, unless it's got some kind of death wish, it's not going to have two different ways of engaging with those employees, right? That's incredibly inefficient. It's going to find a way to comply with this law and in all likelihood apply that to all of its employees. That makes sense for efficiency reasons, but it also makes sense in a preemptive fashion, right? Because we know that laws like these are coming in other jurisdictions as well. And so, a part of my answering, I think, yes to your question, if I heard it correctly, yes, it will have an impact in other jurisdictions. Um, a part of the reason that I say yes is for those reasons. I think it'll just be more initially. It will be a more rational and probably more efficient and cost-effective approach to like generating internal policy that comports with a new law like this. The really interesting following question for me is, okay, great. So New York is now first out of the gate, city-wise, with a law with teeth, right? There are financial penalties for companies that don't comply. So what happens when Chicago has its law and LA has its law and Dallas has its law? Similar space, worst case scenario, similar space, similar concern, but with different requirements. And now, if you are a multinational or just a national company with 10,000 employees sprinkled across 25 different American cities, then it starts to get really interesting and super complex and probably quite expensive to comply as well.
Yeah, I do wonder though, because like you said, you're talking about how enterprises and businesses are going to comply. So how can they be prepared, right? Because my thing is it just like obviously if you're based in New York, you have to answer, you have to follow this. But what if you have employees in New York, or you have a New York office, but you're really based elsewhere? Like how does that work? And like for also smaller enterprises as well.
I guess the best way to start to answer is to say that a virtue of this law, as far as I'm concerned, is that the the commissioners there in New York City have designed it with the hopes of protecting the their citizenry, right? So at base, it's about how do we protect the people that have elected us to protect them, right? And so, given that, it's kind of an easy answer, right? So, regardless of where the company is based, uh, if they are employing New York citizens, folks who reside in one of the five boroughs, then they ought to be considered as being governed by this law, right? They ought to, that kind of company ought to be within the bounds of this law. Some people feel that smaller companies ought to have a bit more wiggle room. They make equity arguments saying that a multinational corporation obviously has deeper pockets, more resources, and can comply more effectively than, say, like a mom and pop can. And so those arguments are out there. But ultimately, if the employee resides and or lives in New York City, then they are going to be affected in all likelihood. High probability they're going to be, the objects of concern for a law like this. And so, say a 25-year-old is living in Brooklyn and working for a company that's got a headquarters in Minnesota. Maybe it only has like 10 employees in New York City. It's probably still going to have to comply with this law.
That's pretty cool. That reminds me of how the GDPR affects most American companies. If they do any business at all in Europe, they have to comply with most of the provisions of the GDPR. So I can see how that might have an accelerator effect here too, the New York law. But pivoting now to generative AI and ChatGPT, the trendy buzzwords of the moment. And that's a gross understatement, by the way. It's like taking up all of our time and attention, right? How are they being discussed in the legal space right now? And also in the responsible AI? I mean, obviously, I wonder if ChatGPT, generative AI, if responsible AI is totally focused just on that now, and if forget about machine learning algorithms, and we're just talking about responsible AI as focused on generative AI.
The conversation within legal circles, both in terms of practitioners and academics, when it comes to generative AI, and specifically, large language models, ChatGPT 3 and 4, the conversation is pretty intense for a few crucial reasons. So, starting with the academy, educators and learners, right, the professors and the students are, first of all, just trying to come to grips with how best to make one's way through a legal education given this new technology. So, I have a small army of research assistants now, most of them law students, and I fold ChatGPT right into our work. So, a concrete example, we are, and this won't surprise you at all, looking very closely at the European Union's AI law, which will very likely come online, become enforceable before this year is out. And we have a host of research questions, things we're trying to understand about this law. And we're making some speculations as well about where the regulatory landscape will be, say, by the time we get to the end of 2024. And right now, I think of ChatGPT 3 as, on some days, like another research assistant. So if I have a question, I'm looking into it. I've got the human RAs looking into it. We will get together, and sometimes we'll just pull GPT right in and say, here's the question. This is what we're thinking. Does this make sense? Is there another way? Did we miss something? Right. So using it in that kind
That's
of
cool.
it's pretty exciting. It's pretty exciting stuff. The students, now leaving the RAs aside for a second, the students have been using generative AI as a study aid. So one of the things that you need to do on a traditional law school as a student is sit down with an exam that lays out hypotheticals for you that describe a scenario, maybe multiple scenarios where something's happening, and then it asks you essentially the exam asks you to apply the law that you've been taught in that course, and so you have to explain how that law is relevant and what the outcome of the situation would be if it was taken to court effectively. One way that you prepare for those types of problems is you look at old exams. Sometimes, if you're really ambitious, students will get together and they'll make up new questions. And so now you can, as a student, go to ChatGPT, maybe take old exams, show them to Chat, explain them to Chat, and then say, hey, make some new problems for me to do. Do the problems, come up with your answer, and then tell Chat to give you an answer, and then explain your answer to Chat, have a conversation in that kind of way. You do that for a couple of rounds, and then take that into office hours with the professor, and you're pretty well armed at that point. So some students are doing that. Jumping out into to practice space, the stakes are very, very high because so much of the work, especially for younger lawyers and for smaller law firms that are not boutiques, right, that do general practice work. So much of that work is focused on creating specific types of documents, right, specific types of contracts, for example, reviewing those contracts as well. So reading these massive documents very closely, looking for problems, looking for places to modify, given what your client is wanting to achieve. Doing that kind of work takes hours and hours if you're a human reader. If you're Chat, it takes seconds or minutes. And so, at this point, if that's the nature of the work that you've been doing for 15, 20 years as a legal practitioner, you've got to come to grips. You've got to come to grips with these large language models. And either start specializing or incorporating them into your processes and making them more efficient. Something you can't stand still. So those are some of the crucial things that folks in the legal space are trying to come to grips with now.
Speaking of coming to grips, I think one group of people that have had to come to grips is artists. Obviously, you and I have spoken in the past about that and how art is generative AI is changing the art world. So how is this still happening since I guess we've last spoken? And how are artists receptive or not receptive to generative AI tools such as Stability AI?
Fascinating moment in entertainment space right now, and in the arts broadly construed, but specifically, visual arts, specifically photography, and very topically, music as well. And so there've been a whole range of controversies. Some of them have gone over into official legal controversies, right? Such as there's the cases now out there in which photographers, or better yet, more precisely, organizations who
Getty Images.
Right, exactly. Who have licenses to use and to sell photographers' works are pushing back against generative AI platforms that have used those databases to train their AI, such that now the AI can make photographs or photograph-like images that have been, in some ways, kind of inspired by what they were trained on. You see the analog of that in the music industry. Just recently, there's been a lot of talk in socials around, new Drake content that was never, penned and recorded by Drake. It's AI generated content inspired by what Drake has done in the past. And so I would be remiss as well if I didn't note that the writer's strike right now in the United States, a part of that has to do with professional writers who historically have done work for TV scripts, movie scripts, for the streams as well, Netflix and so on, are really concerned that they are increasingly in jeopardy as AI comes onto the scene to compete against them. And that's actually a part of the negotiations right now, like what to do about the fact that AI is able to generate scripts now, whereas it was only humans that could do this, say, 5 years ago. So, as usual, well-heeled artists are able to pause and kind of take a breath and think about how to move strategically here. It's noteworthy that, as far as I can tell, Drake has not initiated a lawsuit to kind of claw back any kind of money that's been made, if any has at all, from that AI content inspired by his work. But more workaday artists, I think, are rightly disturbed right now. On the one hand, it seems that no small number of them have already had their work sampled, studied, turned into training material for AI that is now competing against them. And then going forward, that competition in all likelihood will only get better, will only come more quickly. And so again, if you've been comfortably making photographs or making say digital art or making music for the last 10 or 15 years, this is a new kind of terrain right now, and the artists are having to really rethink their business models.
What artist was there that was, I guess, asking, I guess I forgot her name, but she was asking people to make a song out of her songs using AI. I thought that was very fascinating, and if not good publicity, very definitely very interested.
I can't remember which artist that was, but I remember the invitation because it was striking
Yeah.
to me as well. Um, it's a bold invitation, in my opinion, and it kind of points to another part of the intellectual property side of this debate.
Yeah.
uh, I think is under attended to now. So we spend a lot of time talking about copyright law and copyright protections, which are serious and important and vital to all the artists that in the United States that are making their art to make a living. But there's also, and that's federal law as well, right? So U.S. Federal law and copyright resides at that level. But there's also state law. Most of the states in the U.S. have a type of law called publicity rights. And what this category of law does is it allows individuals to control the commercial use of their likeness. So images of their face, the sounds of their voice. Depending on what they do, likeness could also include, say, some unique feature of their body that we're all familiar with. I mean, some people are extremely famous just for like their side profile or for their dimensions, right? Like if you saw like Jordan, for example, all you need to do is see an outline of Jordan. You know what we're talking about. And so many states allow individuals to control uh, the commercial use of those elements of their persona. And so, if an AI generated a new song inspired by, say, some person who lived in the Commonwealth here in Massachusetts, uh, there might be a way to use state law to claw back revenues generated by the sale of that music or that art based on something quite different from copyright. And so again, kind of like we were saying a little earlier, the regulatory space is it's already complicated. It's likely to become almost like a jungle pretty soon. All of these cross-cutting state or municipal, state, national, international laws these pre-existing intellectual property laws coming in at different angles, and then, like Sean has been referencing, the laws coming in from other national jurisdictions, right? So international law as well.
Okay, so as we start to wrap up, I have one quick question, then Esther probably has one more. And how are vendors, providers of AI technology, going to deal with, and generative AI tools? How are they going to pay attention to data privacy and legally and morally and ethically going forward?
In the Institute, one thing that we're seeing dealing with clients is that increasingly their response to this question of how best to kind of tailor privacy policy internally. A part of it is now a function of expectations of their clients, or their customers rather. And so, they're hearing from customers who are expressing various types of concern. Like they want to know how their data is being. They want to know what we call the fate of their data. How is it? What's the intake look like? How are you storing it? How are you commercializing it? How are you protecting it, right, against malicious actors? How are you training your people internally so that they understand all of their policies? How long will you keep it? And then when you're done keeping it, how will you dispose of it? I mean, that entire arc, the fate of data, increasingly customers are curious. Similar types of questions in B2B situations too. And so when you've got a big corporation or even a medium-sized one that's working with a third-party vendor, those types of questions, it's actually absolutely paramount to ask about it, because a data breach that can end some companies at this point. A data breach could also, even if we're not talking about shareholder value falling off of a cliff, that could imperil the ability of a company to get insurance at a decent rate now too, because of course the insurers and the reinsurers are thinking about this. And so it's pretty paramount. In addition, though, to the customers' concerns and anxieties, there are the regulators as well, who are at the state level. I'd say there's greatest activity now. The machinations, movements at the national level domestically, but the state players, I think, are quicker off the mark right here. And they're trying to get a sense of how best to, again, protect their residents, right? Like what do we need to set as a minimum standard, a minimum standard that's acceptable to all the stakeholders for our state. And so those types of companies that we're talking about right now, they also need to be monitoring what's happening at the state level. Getting some sense of where things may be in a year or so. For some people, that seems like a long time out. If you've got to change internal policy, though, to comport with a brand new law, it may as well be yesterday. So they really do need to be paying attention in those ways too.
We've come to the end right now, Michael. And so I have kind of like an idealistic question for you. Obviously, you're working in the space of responsible AI. You're speaking to regulators. You're speaking to those who are really affected by it. And then we're also seeing these new tools come out. What would you say? Is it ever possible to actually have responsible AI?
I'm eternally hopeful across the board, right? Not just in the AI domain. So I certainly see it as a challenge. And if we're talking about universally arriving at responsible AI, an incredible challenge, because there's a lively debate. Well, we've got a sense of what we mean inside of the Institute, but there's a lively debate out there around what responsible AI ought to mean. And so I'm super hopeful. I think that the great value for all of us, for society at large, is pursuing the discussion as much as we pursue the actual goal itself. And because the reasons behind the need for responsible AI, they apply to so many other domains of our lives, right? Really, when we boil it down, it just is a discussion about how to be decent with people, especially with the folks who are less powerful in society and less able to kind of go with the blow, if you take my meaning. And so that conversation is valuable across the board. So whether we will arrive at a uniformly embraced definition of responsible artificial intelligence and an implementation of AI that lines up with that, I don't know. That seems like a tall order, but can we make things much better for everyone on all sides of the AI debate? I think so if we take this challenge seriously.
That's awesome.
That's a very great answer. Very diplomatic. But thank you so much, Michael, for joining us on today's podcast. We hope to see you again. For our listeners, you can connect more with Michael on LinkedIn. Michael is also a Tech Target contributor, so be sure to check out some of his articles, as well as mine and Sean's work on Tech Target. Bye, everyone. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. Please remember to share on your favorite social media platform and leave a review. For more on today's topic, please check out the Tech Target news website.